right, welcome in on a Monday Maize and Blue review. Hope you had a great weekend. I did not realize this was going to be the weekend of the Tom Brady roast, but it happened, and it is the talk of the town. And Tom Brady, he gets ripped, and so does Gronk, and so does Belichick, and so does Edelman and Randy Moss. They all took their turns up there. I didn't see the whole thing. I've seen a lot of snippets, however, and some of the famous people that go up there, Nikki Glazer and others that are popular in the that realm, they participate. It was, a lot of laughs. Even Robert Kraft got ripped, and Tom Brady went up and was, tried to put a stop to that one. So I haven't watched the whole thing. I'm looking forward to it. I think over the next year, 5 years, maybe forever, those will be constantly turning up about, here you go. And here's what Gronk thought of crypto and everything else. But it looked like a lot of good, clean fun. I saw Rich Eisen and Charles Woodson standing by Tom Brady for a picture. I mean, it was, the real Michigan theme, as you might expect there as well. So that was pretty good. Now, today, I don't have a roast. I'm not roasting everyone. I'm going to be talking about Michigan football. There are folks that are just bent out of shape about Michigan's prospects after this year. That this thing is circling the drain, that it is over, that Michigan needs to fire up. It's just, people, a little worrying going on. How justified is the doom and gloom after this season? We'll touch on that coming up straight ahead. But first, we'll talk about this upcoming season and the goals for Michigan football. Now, we can sit here and I can tell you that the Michigan goal and their goals are going to be the same as they were last year and maybe the years before, where it was stated to win the national championship. Now, that should be a goal if you're on the Michigan football team. And, if you're a fan, you say, hey, that is the goal, to win it all. And that's true. Now, I don't think, does Michigan have a chance to win it all, to go back to back and repeat? They do. I don't think Michigan is going to run the table, or I don't think Michigan's going to repeat as national champions. But I think they could have a really good year. I think that they could still, the goal for me, as I think about it and I look through it, I think there's two things. If I am listing the goals out for you, for the people out there, you can respond. I like during the show, if you're watching this, you want to put your feedback up. The goals for Michigan football this upcoming season: win the Big Ten. If Michigan wins the Big Ten, now that there's 18 teams with the addition of the West Coast teams, and they have the toughest schedule in the country, where you have Texas and their non-conference slate, and you've been through it. You know what kind of murderer's row gauntlet that they have lined up. It's an incredible schedule. If Michigan wins the Big Ten, they're going to get in the 12-team playoff. So I could just say, win the Big Ten. That should be the goal. And then I wouldn't have to put the 12-team playoff because they would be there. But I put the 12-team playoff because Michigan doesn't have to win the Big Ten. It'd be very nice. They've as you know, won it 3 times in a row. To win the Big Ten again, to beat Ohio State. If you're going to win the Big Ten, you would be, beating Ohio State. You might have to beat Ohio State twice to do that, and then get into the 12-team playoff, man. And then, getting to this 12-team playoff, if you just ask me one single thing, I would say, I was just going to contradict myself, because if I just said one single thing, what do you think the upside of Michigan or the ceiling is? I'd say get to the 12-team playoff. Well, if, like I said, if they win the Big Ten, they're getting, there's no way that you win the Big Ten. You get to the Big Ten where there's no divisions anymore. The top two teams are going to play in the Big Ten championship game. Those two teams are going to get in the playoffs. Now, Michigan, if they lost just one game, let's say Oregon, and then they played Ohio State on the very last week, and then Oregon tripped up somewhere else, and then, Michigan lost to Ohio State. Could they get in a two-loss Michigan team, then play Ohio State, and then lose again in the Big Ten championship game and have a three-loss Michigan team? Could they get into the 12-team playoff? Yeah, I mean, they could do that. But these are the goals, and I think both of these are achievable. And the thing about Ohio State is that they look like on paper. I've seen a lot of paper champions before. Michigan's been a paper champion before in the offseason. Like, this is the best team in the country. Ohio State looks like that they're the best team on paper. Now, you say, well, what about Georgia? Sure, there's a couple other teams in there. Georgia might have something to say. Oregon, just mentioned, they might have something to say. The team that Michigan's playing week 2, they might have something to say about it that, they all think. And if, you were sitting up there thinking that Michigan could be the number one team, you'd be talking just like you were last year about a national championship. So that's the expectation. How far they're going to go, when I think about it, on one hand, people have asked me, how do I think Michigan's going to be this year? And I say pretty good. And I'll say, well, the defense, they've got so many stars, so many guys that are going to be first-round draft picks. This is a really good defense. It's a great start when you want to have a really good year, talking about having a great defense. And then they say, well, what about offenses? Well, they replaced their entire offense except Colston Loveland. So they got to break in a new quarterback. It's a new offensive line. All new, essentially new starters as receivers. They got Colston Loveland coming back. That's, just even if Jim Harbaugh was here, that's part of the thing that you have to talk to yourself about. If Jim Harbaugh was here, sure, there might not have been as much upheaval because of Harbaugh leaving, and you can say he held whatever it was, Michigan hostage for. He left on the 24th. The championship game was 8 days, so I don't know, almost 2 weeks there, where there were a lot of players that could have been had if Harbaugh was still aboard, or if he left the day after. There was more of an opportunity. But right now, that's where it was at. They could have added a player or two. I may not have lost. I don't know. Would they still have lost? I think they still would have lost the players. I don't know what kind of attrition they would have had. And certainly with the coaching staff they did, but I'm talking overall with the players. Essentially, we've gone over it. They've lost some key parts, but they lost Keon Sabb because of the depth chart. That wasn't changing. I don't think Sabb would still be here if Jim Harbaugh was here. And you can always make a case for, well, they would have done things differently. But I don't see anything differently in terms of the transfers. Now, additions, when they were still, had a chance to zero in and try throwing things at different positions, and with Harbaugh still being here, that could have made a difference. If you're saying, let's just quarterback, and there's a lot of people, like myself included, that's a big question mark. I don't know. Alex Orji might be fine. He might be better than fine. He just might be the surprise of college football, and or he could be the other way, and that's, got people really nervous when you have Alex Orji could be the surprise of college football and could have Michigan in the top 5 all year, and could have Michigan in the college football playoff with the talent that he has around him in Sharon Moore's first year. Wow. He could also be benched by game 2, really. That's a pretty wide margin. So it really depends on how you feel about the whole thing. We've only seen limited snaps from him, a spring game, and some design packages that he was in last year, so they can really run the ball. But you don't know. You don't really know. Does Michigan even know what they have there? So, but they could have put some resources, and if Harbaugh was there, he might have been able to attract something differently. So it could have been a little bit different that way. But mostly, no, it's not. Now let's see where the people are at. Again, let me throw that question myself. I'll throw it at you. The goals for Michigan. What do you tell people? I say defend the Big Ten championship and get to the 12-team playoff. Those seem within reach. And if you can beat Ohio State, which is on paper one of the two teams that is vying for a national championship, you could talk yourself into, competing for the national championship. That's fine. You could talk yourself into it. And maybe, I'll tell you what, I know that on September 7th, it's going to be a great day with Michigan playing Texas. And if Michigan beats Texas, there's going to be a way overreaction about how great Michigan is. If they lose, it's going to go the other way. I like to feel like myself that I could still, I can take it in context for what it means. But even me, I'm somebody who prides myself on being able to take the moment and fit it into what it really is, not going too high or too low. Well, I feel like, Michigan's a legit national championship contender if they beat Texas. I suppose if Michigan comes out against Fresno State, bowls them over, and Orgy comes out and looks really sharp, like, oh, this doesn't even look like the Alex Orgy of the spring game. He's on point. He's moving the team up and down the field. And, oh, yeah, he's connecting. He goes, 12 of 17 in that game. I don't know how many times he's going to throw the ball. But then Texas. But then he's very impressive against Texas. He runs for two. He throws for two. He runs for two against the Longhorns. Doesn't turn the ball over. And Michigan smashes the Longhorns. We're going to be a favorite coming into the big house. And Michigan, behind their first-year starting quarterback, Alex Orgy, goes out and tunes him up and beats him by not just double figures, but routs him, paddles him, and sends him on back home to Austin. Well, maybe there should be then recalibrated goals for U of M. But I still, just today, as I am sitting here, goals 1.0, last week or the week before, I was making my prediction 1.0. Well, ask me, it's kind of the same question. What kind of year do you think you're going to have? And I just said, I think it's going to be pretty good. And they've got a chance to, defend their title. I think they can against Ohio State. And I think they can get to the playoff. Either of those, it's good for me. But then they say, well, what about a record? And I feel like 10-2 right now is doable. The two losses that I have Oregon written down, and I do have Ohio State written down. You don't like doing that. You want to write. You don't like making predictions because you don't ever like entertaining. Michigan actually losing a game. I understand that. I get that. I also know myself, and again, this is going back to something that I just said, that if Michigan beats Texas and then they, manhandle USC, which I think they're going to do, they're going to go to Washington and, a rematch of the national championship game, and they just run all over the Huskies like they did a couple years ago in Ann Arbor. Then they go to Illinois. Of course, they, just pounce Jonathan Smith in his debut at the big house against Michigan. What's that put them? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-0. Am I really going to have Michigan at 8-0 taking on Oregon? Am I going to sit here this week and say, guys, I picked 10-2. So, that's the funny thing about predictions. That is my prediction right now, 10-2. Also, you watch them go through the season and those predictions, it is a fluid situation. People like to hold you to your feet to the fire. But you said they were going to lose 2 games. Well, things change. I could change my opinion next week when it comes down. Now, you don't want to be flip-flopping every week. I mean, there's that part too. But right now, and it's not, it's a 1.0 version. 10-2, win the Big Ten, which would be, it wouldn't be unbelievable. Would it be great? I think so. I think it would be great. 4 in a row, 4 Big Ten chips. Sign me up for winning the Big Ten championship. If you could have Michigan win 4-0, but it precluded them from winning the national championship. I've been given that option right now. Write it down. Would I take that? I think I would. Would it be greedy to say now they're going to win the Big Ten? That means they'll get a bye. If they get a bye, they're sitting pretty in a spot. Get a bye, win 2 more games. Could they win 2 more games if they win the Big Ten? If they're beating Ohio State and they're beating Oregon and they're winning, you're going to feel like they can win a national championship. But I would take that right now. You might not like taking yourself out of the national championship game. But, you think about the positive side, which is, having a great season means you have a really good quarterback, and it bodes well for the future and all of that. So I would take that right now. Admittedly, these kind of games that we play in the offseason, I don't really like them myself, but obviously I'm playing the game. You might not like, but what if you had to lose to Michigan State 5 years in a row somewhere in your lifetime, but it meant the next 5 years they wouldn't score 1 point, and that Michigan would win another championship? Would you take that? You think, another championship within 5 years, but at some point in my lifetime that Michigan would have to lose 5 in a row? I don't like that one. I don't like that one. I don't like entertaining that one, but I would, and I am entertaining that first one. So those are my goals for Michigan for 24. After I answer a few questions and see where the people are at with their predictions and what they think Michigan's goal should be for this upcoming season, I will get to the future of Michigan football. That is, technically this upcoming season is, but 24, beyond 24. That's next. Right now, it's safe to predict not, as Mark is saying. His goal is to get to Indy, is what I think they should be able to do, winning. Yeah. And sometimes, Mark, maybe I'm doing it, putting the cart in front of the horse and all these things. Let's just focus in on Texas. I get that part. If you're somebody that's like, I'm just still just chilling, I'm not thinking about the very end, but it's off-season stuff. It's what we do, and I'm doing it right now. Mark would like an NCAA quarterback assessment. I think it's pretty weak for the real contenders, and one deviation favorable by Michigan quarterback, a good run game, might be enough to repeat. Yeah, and those things will reveal themselves. Georgia's got a good quarterback, returning quarterback. Texas has a good quarterback. You want to put a couple others in there? Those are 2 teams that that just jump to the front where you think about it. Well, I don't know, known commodities, or as much as we know about Quinn Ewers. 2 years ago, I saw Quinn Ewers play against Alabama in Austin, and I thought he was great. He ended up hurting his shoulder, elbow in that game. I thought Texas would have beat Alabama 2 years ago. Last year, they went to Tuscaloosa with Quinn Ewers as their quarterback and won that game. Pretty big deal. He also, as everyone knows, was able to get him to the college football playoff. That's good experience. And, he loses Mitchell and Xavier Worthy. Those are two pretty good pieces as wide receiver. Texas seems to do a pretty good job recruiting their interior defensive line. that was so good last year that you could say that's why they ended up getting to the college football playoff more than yours. That's not a bad argument, but yours is back. So he's proven. And what Georgia has with their QB, he looks pretty good. Oh, yeah. Now, so am I looking at the rest? So we still have a couple more to look at. What about Milroe, who Michigan played in the Rose Bowl? LTM only has one goal. It is a national championship. I see that, and he's talking back to back. Scott is talking about that this team could lose 5 games this year if our offense struggles. Yeah, that's a little bit. That seems a little wild. 5 games. I'm not thinking that way, Scott. That's it. Scott's still talking about he wants to see what Tuttle has to be. Ferris is joining us, and he says Michigan is going to have 4 first-round picks in 2025. He picks Colston Loveland, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, and Will Johnson. 1, 2, 3, 4, and he says maybe Edwards 2. Yeah, Edwards, that would be a long shot, talking about a running back. I tell you what, if Donovan Edwards plays to where he is considered a first-round pick, Michigan is going to be looking great this year. Will Johnson, I feel really good about Will Johnson being picked. I also feel really good about Mason Graham. Is Grant and Loveland, sure, right now they're being projected that way. I could see that, but yeah, I think the 4. Remember when you're doing, and that's what we're doing right now. Projections for next year. Every time I look at the way too early first round projections for the NFL draft, and then when the season's over, and you look back, and you're like, wow, that was way off. Every year it's way off, but but that's where we're at right now. We're just looking at projections. LTM, who was talking national championship, says our offense is going to be really a python and squeeze the life out of teams. Now, isn't that what Joel Klatt was saying about the Michigan? Was he saying about specifically the defense or just the Michigan team? He was doing that last year. So let's see what James is saying. Running backs catching out of the backfield worked very well when needed. Yeah, they didn't do a lot of that, but I agree. I like that, getting the ball to the running backs out of the backfield. And Donovan Edwards, whether you want to throw him a screen or whether you want to throw him a slant or whether you want to put him out, line him up wide and have him on a go route, he's essentially a slot wide receiver. So they did have that. Ferris asking the question, Michigan had only 1 first-round pick this year, JJ, and now they'll have 4 to 5. He's counting. We still going to regress much? Yeah, well, the Michigan has – it's a good point, Ferris. You know how many years would sit there in the offseason and we would talk about Michigan, and people would say, the difference is Michigan has a lot of talent, but they just don't have that premium talent. They just don't have that, first-round draft pick talent like an Alabama or Georgia does. And people were correct when they pointed that out. Michigan didn't have that kind of talent. They do have that kind of frontline talent. That's why this particular season coming up, yeah, they're going to need competent quarterback play, but remember, they don't need J.J. McCarthy out of sight. It's a wonderful thing to remember because it is true. Michigan just needs a quarterback that's not going to turn the ball over, that can manage the game, and that can go out and manage the offense. Michigan is the only team in the country that'll be in the top 25 that doesn't have to have their quarterback be the focal point and the all or nothing piece for their offense. Now, it still feels like that because it's the most important position on the field and because everyone else, and we're always talking about that, it gets a little bit lumped in there. Michigan does, but we all know that that's not Michigan. Michigan has zigged while everybody else has gone to let's throw it, let's get as many points as we can, let's get it to our wide receivers, let's spread the field, let's throw the football. And Michigan is gone completely the other way. The only one. Now you want to say, yeah, but Ole Miss runs it. Okay, there's a few that are trying the Michigan way, and maybe there'll be other teams. It is the NFL, which now college football, the lines are blurred a little bit. If you've heard one person say that it's a copycat league, you've heard 100. So maybe there'll be other teams that'll be trying to be like Michigan. Here's a thought that Edwards could easily be in New York. Yeah, I was going to say I'm as high on Donovan Edwards as anyone. I don't know. I'm pretty high on Donovan Edwards. I was high on him last year. I know as he, would hit the line and go down, and then they weren't getting him the ball, and then every week, while Michigan, you're like, oh, here's going to be the breakout game. Here will be, the one where Donovan Edwards will go crazy, and we never had. Donovan Edwards going crazy. It wasn't until they needed him. This is a good thing. This is something I really like about Donovan Edwards. Last year, they needed him the most in that Penn State game. When he came up big, was it a 3rd and 8? Was it Michigan's first touchdown? I know that Blake Corum ended up with 145 yards, and Blake Corum was Mr. Touchdown. But Donovan Edwards can fill those shoes. He is electric, and that he has come up big, not only last year in the big games like Penn State and obviously the national championship game, but we know that he did that the year before when needed with one hand. And he has gained weight, good weight. He is taking on that leadership role, and he is one of those players that is poised to take the next step. And so, yeah, could he be in New York with a team that wants to run the ball all of the time? Will continue to, yes, he can. Donovan Edwards could be in New York. I'm agreeing with that. I had to talk myself through that because, sometimes you're thinking, well, can they? Yes, he can. Ferris is talking Tuttle. Yeah, I don't, I'm talking Orgy, you're talking Tuttle. Maybe I don't think it's going to be good news if we're talking Tuttle for Michigan, because I don't think Tuttle, I don't even know his status. He got hurt and didn't participate at all in spring. So we're talking about him coming back. He hasn't been able to throw the ball in a year. To what? Him winning the job in the fall? Woo! Now, I'm not going to feel as good if Jack Tuttle, which I don't expect to happen, is going to be Michigan's starting quarterback. Will Arch Manning be the surprise starter versus Texas? That would be a surprise. My guess would be no. Ferris is keeping a magic number of 60% on Orgy. That sounds like a pretty good number. Can he get close to that? Yeah. A question, why don't any of the Mannings go to the same school? That's a great question. They did, didn't they? Didn't Eli and the dad, and they both go to Ole Miss? So you're talking about all of the sons. I don't know. Blaze your own path. If you're Eli, do you really want to go to Tennessee? And, so, you say compare you to Peyton because you're going to be, he went where his dad went. And why did Arch go to Texas? So I without hearing each one of them, I think the blaze your own path, your own trail, I would guess that would be the answer to that question. So there we are, right? Now, let's get to the doom and gloom right after this one. David Jelly says this defense is going to be nasty yet again. We get solid quarterback play and no turnovers. We will be right there. Mullings will be a huge part with his ability to catch the ball. Yeah. Khalil Mullings, look at Michigan's running game is key. Orgy, Donovan Edwards, Khalil Mullings, as we sit here right now. You want to make a case for Benjamin Hall, Jordan Marshall, so it's their deepest position, running back, what Michigan has right now. And the top two, you got them. You've got a real thunder and lightning type situation in Mullings and Edwards. You got to like that. Oh, and you should feel good if you're a Michigan fan. Now we get to the next thing. The 24 goals, there they are. Win the Big Ten. If they do that, they're going to get to the 12-team playoff. If they don't win the Big Ten, get to the 12-team playoff. To me, that's the goal. We're putting a Z on there. I just put two of them down there. Now, doom and gloom after 25. The talent is all going in the first round. We talk about the NIL so much. They need to get it together. Michigan needs to get the NIL together. Ward Manuel needs to get the NIL together. Or they won't be able to recruit, and then they won't be able to get people in the portal. Now, I put people in the portal there as recruiting and the portal. They feel like they're just as equal parts to me right now in being a key to football in 24 and beyond. The amount of guys that after a year that hit the portal, it used to be where you'd look at it like the draft and then free agency of the NFL, but I'm putting them at as equal parts, where Michigan got 10 players last year. They've got 5 right now. The adding on of key pieces, and when you're adding them on, now all 10 didn't figure in Michigan winning the national championship last year, but James Turner sure as heck did. So did the 3 offensive linemen that they brought in. Obviously, Josh Wallace did. He was a key figure. And Josiah Stewart, maybe they don't make the national championship game without Josiah Stewart making the plays and emerging like he did. So, yeah, the portal is as big as recruiting right now. That NLI part is the one where it confounds Michigan fans. I put the doom and gloom scenario up there because it was just over this weekend that I was sitting around on Twitter, and someone who runs a Michigan podcast was saying, it was a doom and gloom. It was Michigan, if they don't get up to speed with the NIL, the talent's going to be all gone after next year, and Michigan's going to be sitting around holding their you-know-what. Now, is that fair? I think there's a lot of people that say that. That doesn't mean that it's true. I do follow the line of thinking that you've got to be able to get premium players, and you got to be able to recruit, at least some 5 stars and get them in, or you're really asking your coaching staff to develop. And you need talent, and then you need to develop the talent, but you need both. You need to be able to develop and have an eye for talent, but you also need some of the top talent. So this is where this is coming from, plus NIL. And your average Michigan fan wants Michigan to get a bunch of 5 stars by paying them. And if it's not a bunch of 5 stars, how about just a couple? How about just at the quarterback position? How about you can do it now and nobody cares, so it technically is above board, and that's where the hookup, that's where the snag is. Michigan's approach still is, it's like, yeah, they're all about NIL above board, and technically promising the cash up front. It's as much strategy for Michigan as it is not willing to get off of that hill that they've been on for 20 years about. That's not what's happening at Michigan football. Although I do think that old habits die hard. And when you preach for 20 years that we don't pay high school, and then now everybody's doing it, and you're like, oh, okay, now we got to do it. I think that at some point they might be forced to do that. Hopefully, it's not where it's like you have a downturn or it's really two bad recruiting classes, and then you're left, and then you get it because you could be then playing catch up. That is a fear. I think it's how legitimate it is, but it could happen. The thing that I think about NIL has been going on for a couple classes, and you go back to the 2022 class. These guys are now juniors. NIL was around in this year, and Will Johnson signed a NIL deal before he played in the spring game as a high school player, or graduated early. I'm sorry, he wasn't in high school anymore. So even back to 2022, Michigan was getting NIL deals to a high school kid, not while he was in high school, but when he was just out of high school. Now, they didn't pay for the rest of these guys, but they came up, they just hit. This was a great recruiting class. As Michigan ended up rivals, I said top 10, they were 9. But Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham, these guys are playing like 5-stars. I'd say Derek Moore is playing like a 5-star. Will Johnson was a 5-star. Colston Loveland is playing like a 5-star. Michigan should have had maybe the number 1 recruiting class. I'd have to look to see who was one, but I feel safe to say with the development and the eye, with especially Grant, Graham, and Moore, that Michigan would have a top 5 recruiting class. That was just in year 1. And yeah, it was just happening. And then they had a top 20. They had won a Big Ten championship, and they still got some players 2 years ago that you look that are going to be the next wave. Now, some, like Samaj Morgan, have already contributed big time. Morgan in the Big Ten championship game. Morgan, I know he muffed that ball in the Rose Bowl, but he has shown flashes. Hall, I think everybody's bullish on him. And then these defensive pieces, Michigan has been so stacked on defense, it's been very difficult to get into the 2 deep. But the guy they call Shug, Jair Hill, I think he's going to be the starter. And then a couple of these guys, Kumba, the Frenchman, and Etta, and even Ishmael, I could see these guys being in there and contributing. Last year, Michigan was top 15. And now, so we just saw these guys in the spring, and there are probably a few more that you could add in here, but this was with NIL. Dom Nichols looks like a star, and so does Cole Sullivan. And it was just a spring game, and these guys, came in early, in for spring. But both Sullivan and Nichols, it wouldn't surprise me if these guys were stars. Now, I don't know if Jaden Davis, Jordan Marshall, Guaranira, the offensive lineman from Florida, came in and looked pretty good. So did the tight ends. I know the point there is that you've had a top 10, a top 20, and a top 15 the last 3 years. So I think you hope for a top 10 recruiting class. And they're off not to a fast start, but a slow start. When they got 4 guys right now, they just got a Gatch, a nice 4-star offensive lineman out of the state of Michigan. That's not a small thing. That was a good, very good land. They got the number 1 edge in the country in Marshall out of Illinois. They've been doing a good, decent job with a small amount of players, but people want, to be freaking out. Is it legit? I don't know. Questioning things is always okay. Freaking out about Michigan in 25 because NIL and they're not paying. I'm not ready to do that, because if you've watched me the last couple of years, I've been on the front lines as much as anybody, like, they got to come up. But I've also said that I am going to allow them to execute their plan. And if you recall, not last year at this time, but the year before, you had to allow them to go through and see how they were going to use NIL. And Michigan used NIL last year, and they won the national championship because of it. A big part of it. No NIL, no national championship. Now it changes. Maybe by the week, certainly by the month, it changes. And I'm going to give Michigan. Remember the 2 years ago, people were saying that the sky was falling because Michigan, they're not paying the high school recruits, and because of admissions, they can't get anybody in the transfer portal. That's what I'd say the experts, but that was a common refrain. Michigan in this new age of college football, they're not able to get any high school recruits, which is still, kind of true. But they weren't, the key part of that is they weren't able to get any transfers in because of admissions. And then they went out and refusal to pay with NIL, and they went out and landed 10 players in the transfer portal. And we've been over the guys. Go back and listen. And they were big hits. So they rang that bell when everybody was wringing their hands about admissions for football, and nobody sat back and were people doing huge shows about, oh, well, hey, Michigan really figured out that piece. Great job. We kind of jumped the gun on that. So I am going to let them see. I am going to let it play out. You might not like that. No, they got to get a top 15, hopefully a top 10 recruiting class. Transfer portal is as important. And then, I don't know if we talk about let them cook behind the scenes or whatever they're doing. I don't think that they're sitting back, and I feel like a lot of the fans are like, they're just arrogant, and Ward Manuel is sitting up there not returning phone call. I don't think that's how it's going. I'm not over here telling you that Ward Manuel is some trailblazer with NIL and just wait because he's going to unleash something. I'm not sitting around there that. I'm also not falling for any kind of, from a Michigan standpoint, of some of these stuff like, oh, they've got a monster. They're sitting on a monster when it comes to NIL, like the revenue that's going to be coming. I'm in the spot of wait and see. There was at least 3 reveals about Michigan was going to turn the revenue on its ear, and they were blowing everybody away, and just wait till the treasure trove is open and this NIL is unleashed. Those things, there's some nice things. They got a lot of people working really hard, and that's behind the scenes, but that's part of the encouraging thing. It's a strategy. And just like Michigan, the thing about the doom and gloom is they are not following the obvious path. If I was part of the NIL team and they brought me in on the first meeting and they gave me the opportunity to speak, I would say, you guys have been working really hard, but the bottom line is you got to get your wallets out and start paying for this top talent. That's what I would say. I'd say it a nicer way than that. And they could come back and say, yeah, that's what everybody's doing. We are not following the obvious path. Michigan, like they were with their running game, when everybody was passing, they went to the run. Now everybody's paying the top recruits. And Michigan's like, strategically, part of it is some of their old ways. And how soon they could marry that up and what they've got working behind the scenes. They came up and rang the bell when nobody was expecting it in admissions, being able to sign the guys in the transfer portal last year. I think that I don't say they're going to figure out NIL. This part about it, are they waiting for revenue sharing? And they're sitting back, and once they get that, they're going to be like, we'll be fine. Can they afford to do that? These are all great questions that a lot of people think they know the answers to, and I listen to them to see what kind of points that they make and everything else. I wouldn't hold my breath on that. The second part, somebody would say, if I was at that meeting again, go ahead. Do you have anything else you want to say? You're saying what every fan says about just open up the wallets. I'd say, if you're not going to go after the premium talent across the board, can you selectively, like at the quarterback position, can you stack up some of the money and just go after the quarterbacks? Because really, where would our confidence be if Michigan had Dante Moore, the quarterbacks that they have right now, and Dante Moore, and then they had Bryce Underwood committed. Oh, they would have two local kids that were the highest rated of anybody ever in the state of Michigan at quarterback on their roster. I know we know a little bit about Dante Moore because he's played a little bit, but people would be like, Dante Moore. They would have Dante Moore, Jaden Davis, Alex Orji, Bryce. People would be talking about championship. Now, those are two. Now, could they have paid, easy for me to say, could they have thrown 5 Dante Moore's way? Could they have thrown 10? Whatever it costs. That might be way off. 5 million, 6 million for those guys. Feels like it's something like that. Yeah, the thing would be, it would be different. I'm going to take some feedback. So the whole thing, to wrap it up, and maybe I could have just done this and say, hey, you could have had a 2-minute pod. What's the goal? Michigan goals this year? Make the college. If I had to just say one, it would say win the Big Ten, because then all of their goals will be in front of them. They are going to make the 12-team playoff, but it's more likely that they're going to make the 12-team playoff than win the Big Ten. But so I put both of those goals in there. And then what about the doom and gloom after next year, because they lose all of this talent and recruiting is not like they're not selling, getting commitments like hotcakes, and obviously they're coming off a national championship. I think I'm like preaching patience. I'm telling you that Michigan is they've answered some of these questions along the way when people didn't say, oh, admissions wasn't going to happen. It just didn't pull that out of thin air. They were strategic that way. And I think, they understand. They've got people looking at this every which way. I don't think they're just sitting back like, we're Michigan. We're Michigan. We're just going to put the ring in front of them and say, let's go. Sign up. We're the maize and blue. We're the leaders. Sign up or forget you. I don't think that that's the route they're going. It's not. I know people say sometimes I just trust the coaches, or you got to trust Michigan. I think you got to give them a little slack in this area, and the reason is the success that they've had, and the recent success on that admission part that nobody was predicting, and that the other part is that this is a team that in a university that does have all the resources, that they're not taking up. They're going to be in the mix for all of this, and it's all changing all the time. So, I feel like giving them a chance to prove themselves here. I have a confidence. It's not that I'm just trusting a specific coach like Sharon Moore. I'm sitting here. I'm like, oh, I really love Ward Manuel and the way he gets his hands in the dirt. I'm trusting the brand of Michigan football in 110,000 seats that they have to fill up, and the resources that they have at their disposal. That's what I'm trusting, that they will figure this part out. That's where I'm at. Now, I'll take some feedback. I just talked for a long time and, rambling a little bit. I would agree if somebody said that, and I don't actually see somebody saying that, but let's see what the people think about the doom and gloom scenario. Mark, if Michigan beats Texas, then pretty much will be a favorite until it loses, guaranteed. Okay, I buy that. Maybe a push at OSU, but 11-0 Michigan likely favored over 11-0 OSU. Even at the shoe. Well, I would disagree with that, but hopefully, Mark, we're talking about 2 11-0 teams at the Horseshoe. You're saying that Michigan would likely be a favorite there. I don't think so because of the home field, but hey, it would be nice. Ryan Cooper Day will have a hard time beating Michigan. That factors. Is that going to factor in the point spread? I'm not sure about. OSU fans, I like how he puts Michigan in brackets because they won't say their name. They're in your head. Michigan wins 4 in a row. Ryan Day has to go. Yeah, I think that's an easy prediction. I think if Michigan beats Ohio State this year with the championship team that they put together in the offseason, then Ryan Day will be fired. It'll be a lot like John Cooper. That's it. Mark is saying football now is get to the Final Four and win the Natty. Conference now is really secondary. Yeah, I'll buy that, but that's the whole thing along the way. And I know Ohio State 2 years ago didn't beat Michigan, and they were a shanked field goal away for getting a chance to beat TCU and winning it all. It still would have had that little asterisk there. Hey, you guys won the national championship but didn't beat Michigan. That would have been nice. And Michigan. So the question mark is, would you rather beat Ohio State, go to Indianapolis, win the Big Ten, but then fall short in the college football playoff, or would you like to, the scenario of not winning the Big Ten, but still getting to the college football playoff and making the Final Four? There's your sales job. Now, notice I didn't say win the national. Like there could have been an Ohio State fan 2 years ago that said, I would have rather have beat Michigan and not win the national championship than had that kicker make the field goal and beat TCU and have a championship. It would have felt hollow. I mean, you could say that, but that's not the way. You don't like saying it because you don't like entertaining the thought. Ohio State fans can't even say Michigan's name. So they're certainly not going to talk about, we'll take a loss if we win the national championship. At least I can say it. Scott is pretty sure that Michigan is not going to beat Ohio State, Washington, Oregon, and USC with a game manager. Well, they beat Ohio State, Washington 3 years ago with a game manager. I think they could beat USC with a game manager. Oregon, I don't know. Like Oregon is this like super juggernaut that Michigan, at home, an 8-0 Michigan's not going to be able to play with. So Scott, you're talking about, and I'm not. There's game managers and then there's game managers. But Cade McNamara wasn't a game manager. Like he was just some baller. Cade McNamara was a nice game manager. And Alex Orji could be that. They beat Ohio State. Now you can say, hey, that game's on the road. There's a lot of ways to go against that argument, but there you go. And that's assuming that you are going to have a game manager in Orgy. Jelly is saying that the defense is going to be nasty. Here it is again. Solid quarterback play, no turnovers. We'll be right there. Seemed like I read that one already. Let's go to a couple more. Kicking game is a big question. Hope the kid from Arkansas State pans out and pushes the other guys to get the starting job. Well, it was a big question mark last year, and Turner solved it. And this kid that's coming in, he's got a big leg, and he's been pretty accomplished. Now, yeah, kicking in Jonesboro, Arkansas is a little bit different than kicking in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'll buy that. Scar does love Brady Pre's corn. You're right about that. We need to land this 5-star receiver. Without knowing what 5-star receiver that you're talking about, I'm going to say that Michigan's probably not going to land a 5-star receiver. That's going to be my guess. I did see that they were in on some top receiver, but I don't think that's really going to happen. Could be wrong about that. Treppa, how many players came to Michigan because Harbaugh was the head coach? Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. It feels like JJ maybe. Who else? I don't know, did Blake Corum? Would Blake Corum or JJ McCarthy not have come to Michigan if Harbaugh wasn't here? Again, that's a difficult one to say. Okay, it's always great to have the coach on here. Antoine, the same Michigan fans with more doom and gloom. We literally beat the teams with game managers. Antoine says most schools don't develop like that anymore. Most of these schools treat players like the NFL. If they're not good enough, they throw them away. Michigan keeps them and keeps developing them. I think that's half true. I mean, Michigan's processing guys, and guys are here for a second and they're out. And, last year you could say, Michigan, Harbaugh treated this roster like it was an NFL roster. Like people were not people, some people were complaining that Michigan had the players on the team. Why bring in so many transfer offensive linemen when there's guys right here that you recruited, that you developed, that are ready for their chance? The answer was Harbaugh thought that this was a special team and that he was going to bring competition in, and it didn't matter if you were, let's say, Greg Crippen or Gio El Hade, who have been here for 2 or 3 years and have waited their turn. No, they were going to bring in Drake Nugent. They were going to bring in Miles Hinton and Ladarius Henderson. And you're going to have a chance to compete. And if you can do it, you'll be there. If not, bye. If you want to hit the portal, hit it. And things have shifted. That's what we're talking about. Like, this Michigan's not sitting around and it's a great, the part about we're going to be really loyal to players that were recruited and that have been in the system. That is obviously not true. There's a part where when this was happening, people are like, this is going to cause problems in the locker room and this is going to cause the friction within the team. And I don't know, maybe it did, but it didn't stop Michigan from winning last year. Cade was honorable mention Big Ten. If we get that, sky's the limit. Yeah. The feedback maven, formerly known as Andres, is saying that Davis Warren is better than Cade McNamara. R. Smith is talking about winning them all. M Go Blue 1 2 3 4. Don't ever leave your Don't ever leave your computer around. I think I can figure out your password. M Go Blue, but Zeke Berry is going to be elite. R. Smith, have some faith, Blue. Faith is a good thing as a fan. Hope, faith, and I think that you should have some hope. Question for me is, what quarterback do you want to start? That is Alex Orji is the answer to that question. That's who I want. And I think that's who everyone should want. But, you can like guys for, different reasons. We'll take one more. Comes from OT. This one just coming across at a couple minutes before 3 o'clock. OT saying OSU won't compete for a natty. Their defensive line is overrated, and their quarterback and wide receiver room isn't as good as last year. Yeah. Yeah, I wonder about the offensive line, the tackle position. I don't know about the quarterback. Maybe you're right. The thing about Ohio State is they've been really good. They've been really good the last 3 years. The amount of talent that they have, but Michigan, it was, they just kept working at it, chipping away, and finally put it all together 3 years ago. But then once they got a taste of that, man, they wanted it again. Then they went down there with JJ. Remember, JJ last year didn't put it together in terms of passing the ball down the field until the Ohio State game. And then this last year, Michigan was not going to be denied. They've got that taste of that, and they're in Ohio State's head. And when you get in the coach's head, like Michigan has, we have seen it. If you're old enough, somebody's already referenced John Cooper. Ryan Day is is a modern day John Cooper. He assembles an incredible amount of talent. But on game day, 2 years ago, that was the game in Columbus. Ryan Day had CJ freaking Stroud as quarterback. I'd have to go off the top of my head. There were at least 3 instances, 4th and 2 around midfield, and Day's punting. I would have never punted at home with CJ Stroud in the. I mean, come on. That's what I'm sure the Ohio State fans were saying in there. And there are a couple other spots that you're sitting in there. Let's play for a 50-yard field goal when you got to get. What? Now, I'm not an Ohio State fan, but if I was 2 years ago, I'd have been looking at Ryan Day like, are we sure this is the guy that we want leading the team? That's going to crawl into a shell? That's going to coach differently against the team up north? Michigan's got that, and it's not a small thing. Being into the heads of the coaches and players, and certainly the fans. It's a nice spot to be when you are when the shoe's on the other foot. But you can also remember what that shoe felt like. Oh, it was tight. It hurt. And you felt like just taking it out and kicking yourself in the backside with it. But that shoe is on the Ohio State foot now. And it's advantage Michigan. I know that in this very podcast, I picked Michigan to lose to Ohio State because it's a schedule. Am I picking Michigan to go undefeated next year? No. Where's their toughest game? At Ohio State. That's the toughest game. So I'm gonna pick them right now. Well, like I said earlier, they beat Texas without going crazy. They're going undefeated. Even if Michigan beats, I don't know. You can't make any proclamations about. I'm not going to change my mind, or I'm staying. I'm just where I'm at right now. But if I could transport myself to late November, and Michigan only has 1 loss, and Ohio State's undefeated, am I going to be sitting around saying, nope, Michigan has no chance? No. We're talking about Michigan having a chance. Because Michigan's going to have a chance in that game. Not automatically I'm not putting an L down in Penn. I'm just playing it. And Mark, it's always OSU. Game was tougher than Alabama. I don't know about that, Mark. I mean, it was tough. They were so it was for everything. So was the Alabama game. AJ's already got the win against Ohio State, and he's for the last 3 years I've only known him for 3 years. But I got to say, Antoine, ever since I've met you, you've been right about Michigan and Ohio State. So, it's just when we met, when you came in, and you have been right every single year. Everything that you put down has been correct. So I don't know. I've seen movies where somebody just walks up to a dice table and somebody, gets there at the end. You're like, hey, what's up? You kind of meet their glance from across the table. And then, you say, I'm with him. You put out your money with whoever the roller is. And then, in this case, it was Antoine. He was like, touchdown. And then, I'm like, hey, let's do it again. Let's try that. He's on there. Boom. Throwing him again. He needs to hit a number. He needs a 4. 4 the hard way. Here's Antoine. You need to do it again. I'm shoving all my chips in there again with him, and he's throwing the dice out there, and he's coming up big again. And now he's saying, take all of that money that you've won and just put it in there again. He's ready for it again. He's ready to throw the boats, roll the bones. He's examined the game. He's feeling it. Fire. Let's go. Ooh, snake eyes. Just kidding. All right, thanks so much for joining us. Coming up on Wednesday, we'll be back here with a full show talking about Michigan, everything going on with the Maize and Blue. Former Wolverine Jim Scarcelli will join the show. We'll see what Scar's got cooking behind the scenes, and then he will bring it front and center talking about Michigan. I would love for you folks to join up with the Maize and Blue review. And you can do things like talk about Michigan's latest recruit, Avery Gatch, the big offensive lineman out of Groves in Birmingham that Michigan was able to get his commitment on Friday afternoon. And that was a great commitment for Michigan. Other than that, when it comes down to the Maize and Blue, we want to talk with you all day and all night. And to do that, you join the Maize and Blue review today by going to michigan.rivals.com. You like basketball? We're talking about Dusty. And if he's got a tournament team now over there, they want to go through the particular jokes of the Tom Brady roast. And now that zinger at Gronk, it's all there. All to be broken down and talked about. So we will see you over there on the Maize and Blue review. We'll see you here on Wednesday. Smash that like button. And if you're someone who listens to the podcast, it means everything in the podcast world to get a rating, to get a comment. And if you're someone that says you should shorten up these, whatever your comment is, I can't tell you what it is. Maybe it could be as simple as what Michael's is. Go Blue. Nice comment. Maybe it could be, Sean talking to Antoine. Ooh, here's somebody who's talking about Antoine was running his mouth. Okay. Get a little post on post crime coming in late. That's it. So thanks for those 5-star comments. We like the 5 stars and certainly any reviews that you might give there. All right, that's going to do it. Take care, everyone. Have yourself a great rest of your Monday. So long.